everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gripe, the show where I do short, sweet movie reviews of new releases, plus the one thing that annoyed me the most. And yes, I just did another movie review, so I am wearing the same shirt, I just changed my hair. See? I'm being economical. So this week, or this episode, I'm going to be talking about the film Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. So, I'm going to make one thing very clear. I've never read the books, The Hunger Games, so I didn't go into this movie with any sort of expectation of how the story was supposed to play out. I also did not really like the second one. Like, the second one really annoyed me. The first part of Mockingjay, I was kind of hopeful about, it was half a movie, but I was hopeful that it would actually, yield something. So, just kind of right off the bat, I can say I was not I was interested in seeing the movie because I wanted to know how the story ended, but I was not super excited for it, like, people who've, been really invested in this story. So, but I'm not going to let that, play too much into my opinion. It just might kind of come across that way. So, where did we leave off with the first half of the Hunger Games, of Mockingjay? Was basically, they go into the Capitol, they retrieve Peeta, and when they get Peeta back, he's like, freaking out at Katniss because apparently they did something to make him believe that Katniss was his enemy. So now he's freaking out. Katniss is, an emotional wreck, and, they're still at war with the Capitol. And so, the goal then is, okay, so because of what President Snow did to Peeta, Katniss wants to go into the Capitol and kill Snow. Makes sense, right? So she kind of goes off on her own. They don't want her to do that because, she's the Mockingjay. She's supposed to be this, symbol. She's not actually supposed to go out there and risk her life, but that's exactly what she's going to do. So then she and a team go into the Capitol where there's just booby traps everywhere. There's, guards. There's all sorts of things basically meant to kill them. But no matter what, she's determined to get through this in order to get to Snow and, exact her revenge, basically. And that's pretty much the entire plot of the story. Because remember, this is the second half of a story. This is not its own contained story so much, it's the second half of one large story. The first half was, not terrible, but it was also fairly, it did what it needed to do. This one, on the other hand, was more just like, okay, now we're going to get to that ending. We're going to show you, this is how the story ends. And I don't want to get into too much of the ending because, it would be a pretty big, there's a number of spoilers that if I were to really get into them. But what it kind of comes down to is something that they've been building toward the entire first half of this movie, which was you've got Snow on one side, you got Coin on the other side, and when you look at Coin's motivations, they seem noble enough, but ultimately she and Snow are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're almost the same exact person. So if you're Katniss, you're looking at this going, okay, I hate Snow because of what he did to Peeta and, her, District 12 and all that stuff. So it's like, she already has this vengeance for him, but she also kind of has this vengeance for Coin because she is just using her for her own gain, for her own political advantages. So, and that kind of puts her at this choice. Basically, it leaves Katniss with a choice, and ultimately she makes her choice, and even though she makes her personal choice, it doesn't really change the overall outcome. The end result still occurs, and then everything kind of devolves from there. If I'm being vague, that's because there really is kind of a big spoiler moment, and I don't necessarily want to give it away here for people who are excited about it, but if you've read the book, then you've probably already seen the movie anyway, so it doesn't matter. Either way, so, like I said, the plot is half a movie. It's mostly her kind of struggling with, Peeta, and then the aftermath of, their incursion into the Capitol, and then the bulk of the movie is this incursion, this, passing through the streets and trying to get past all these traps and stay alive and not get burned alive or anything like that, and, go underground and fight zombies and things like that. So it's definitely meant to be kind of this epic ending to it. Like it's taking the Hunger Games to a whole new levels is kind of the idea. It's like, the Hunger Games are not, it's not just these kids fighting kids in the wooded environment kind of thing anymore. It's more like it's rebels fighting these super powerful capital people in on the streets in their home turf kind of thing. So it just basically takes the concept that was introduced in the first Hunger Game movie and just makes it bigger, which is why it's 2 movies instead of 1. So here's my problem with the whole thing. And maybe it's because it's something that's explained in the book and it's not something that's done well enough in the movie, but Katniss's motivations are terrible. She is fighting for the wrong reason every single time. Like at the very beginning of the first movie, she's fighting for the right reason. She's doing something the right way. But everything after that is the wrong reason, and I don't understand it. I don't understand why she is so intent on keeping Peeta alive. I know she's in love with him. That makes sense, even though he hasn't necessarily... maybe in the first movie they didn't do a good enough job of showing how these two really did survive the Hunger Games together, because there was that moment in the cave, but that was about as far as it really went. It didn't really feel... there wasn't really this, like, super strong emotional connection in that. So it kind of has baffled me from the very beginning how her motivations have just been so twisted. And it's like, I'm going to go kill Snow, not because he's terrorizing the entire world, not because they use this, tool, the Hunger Games, to just continue oppressing the poorer populations of their country. No, she's doing it because he made her boyfriend hate her. That's her motivation at the end of the day. And it's really hard for me to want to really root for her if she doesn't even see the stupidity of her own motivations. But then there's a moment in the movie, and I'm not going to spoil it, but when the motivations that she should be fighting for, she comes face to face with that, and it's obliterated. So she is so blinded by wanting to, kill Snow and wanting to get Peeta back the way he was and love and all that stuff, that the whole reason she's in this situation to begin with is right in front of her, and it disappears. It vanishes before her eyes in this, just blaze of destruction. So, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a good thing that they did that to, like, say her motivations were so stupid that it wasn't until this point that you really start to see what she really should be fighting for. And when she finally realizes that, it's too late. She can't do anything about it at that point. They don't make a big enough case for it throughout the story, and that's probably because, they kind of keep it safe and contained for a while, but then it just appears again, and she's like, oh, sees, and then it's gone. So that's my key gripe for not just this movie, but the whole series is, her motivations are very strange, given the climate that she's in. And she has these moments where she does kind of see the bigger picture, sees what she should really be focusing on. But ultimately we get to the end and it's just like her motivations are just silly and, very... It's hard to support her when she's so just focused on one thing, and ultimately she gets that one thing in the end. There is a bittersweet ending to this story, but at the same time, it feels very like the impact that the first half of Catching Fire had this impact that I was like, oh my god, this is what I was hoping for, and then it was gone. There were parts in the first half of Mockingjay that also had that, but then in this movie, completely gone. None whatsoever. Of just think of yourself in this oppressive society, this, dystopic world, and people are actually fighting back, and they're doing things to, save themselves and to fight back, and ultimately, it just kind of gets shoved under the rug because she has this teenage romance for a guy who it doesn't even make sense to me. She's even got Gale, who has been fighting for her and doing all this stuff, and then just, he makes one mistake and suddenly he's the devil, despite the fact he protected her family while she was in the Hunger Games. He's like fighting for her at every single turn. He's been nothing but the loyal loyal boyfriend material, and she just said, no, you're done. I don't, goodbye, Gale. It's like, this is the guy who's like actually doing stuff for you, and you're still focused on this, and I don't know. I didn't read the books again, so I don't understand this at all, and maybe I'm not supposed to. But either way, that's definitely my key gripe. Is it's kind of mind-boggling how her motivations drive the story. And, ultimately this movie was kind of dull, with the exception of, a couple of scenes that were really intense. It was a little dull. Now, I'm not gonna say that the ending is bad, because I actually enjoyed how they ended it. I think they did a good job with ending the story the right way, just on kind of a philosophical level, but I'm not sure they ended the story the right way, just as a story. So, somewhat of a disappointment, but then again, like I said, I didn't go into it with really high expectations. I came out like, yeah, there was some good stuff. I was entertained enough, which is, I guess, good enough. Entertained enough is good enough. So this movie I'd probably give 6 stars out of 10. Definitely not as good as the first Hunger Games, and probably not as good as the first half of the Mockingjay, but maybe better than Catching Fire. I didn't like Catching Fire. So, yeah, that's my review of Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. So, thanks again for watching Key Gripe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.